This is a sarahferrismedia.com production. If you want ad-free episodes, early access, and exclusive content, you can simply click the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts now to unlock all of that and more. By subscribing, you're directly supporting our work and helping us to continue these important conversations. Season 5 of Stop the Killing is proudly brought to you by our hero sponsor, ROC, spelt R-O-C. ROC is a leader in AI technology, enhancing school safety with real-time threat detection and rapid response systems. ROC helps schools and first responders act quickly when every second counts. And don't forget, one easy way that you can support the podcast is by supporting our sponsors like ROC. Learn more at roc.ai/Stop the Killing Podcast. That's roc.ai/Stop the Killing Podcast.
More than 2 decades ago, Imram Corporation was founded to improve safety and security for businesses, schools, houses of worship, and communities. Since then, they've partnered with organizations worldwide to protect what matters most. Their flagship product, Unity IS, offers flexible access control solutions on-premises or in the cloud and integrates seamlessly with advanced security technologies. Trusted by thousands of clients, Unity IS helps prevent threats and create safer environments. Imram's commitment to customer success and safety has earned them a reputation as a leader in the security industry. Learn more at imram.com. That's imram.com, IMRON.com. We wouldn't need any technical solutions or any protective solutions, any hardening of the target, if we were so good at these earlier things.
I'm Sarah Ferris, true crime podcast producer.
And I'm Catherine Schweid, former head of the FBI's active shooter program.
And you're listening to Stop the Killing.
We have an amazing guest today as part of our series of pieces where we share the most exciting research that's being done on how to increase school safety, how to reduce firearms injuries, and all things that are that. As you may know, I'm part of the National Center for School Safety. I'm just an advisor to that group, but they're based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the University of Michigan. That's also the location where they run the National Institute for Firearms Injury Prevention. Our guest for today, who's going to talk about the research that she's doing, Dr. Sarah Stilwell from the University of Michigan. I love her title. She just told us what her title is. Sarah, tell our audience your title.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Dr. Sarah Stilwell, and I'm a research investigator, again, with the University of Michigan Institute for Firearm Injury Prevention, and also with the National Center for School Safety.
Can you tell us first kind of how you came to this? Who are you? Where did you come from?
Yeah, sure. So as a researcher, my work focuses on comprehensive school safety, sort of evaluating what folks do as they're implementing different school safety strategies, thinking about the efficacy of those implementation measures and youth violence prevention in general, and positive youth development. So really making sure that we're supporting the entire developmental process and leading to understanding how to support children in the best way possible. And I have experience as a former elementary educator. And so I'm really dedicated to bridging the gap between research and practice, especially as we talk about how to keep children safe in school. So thinking about all the research that I've done previously and then moved into an elementary school space and then kind of wedding those two worlds together to make sure that I'm really understanding how to translate the materials back into a way that's really tangible for folks who are in the spaces, implementing these things on the day-to-day, boots on the ground. So they know what it means to keep children safe. And so we know that school safety has become an increasingly more urgent need. It's something that people are talking about all the time, but often don't really know exactly where to start or how to address it. And it's not just crucial for addressing and preventing youth violence, but also there's ways that it can promote academic achievement, overall youth well-being, and this pro-social behavior. Because if we think about it, youth spend so much time in schools. That's where they spend most of their time. And when they're doing that, they're interacting with their peers, they're interacting with teachers. And so we really need to sort out ways where in those interactions, when they're spending so much time there, we're really fostering ways that they can develop into healthy, productive, amazing people who will move through the world in the safest and best way possible. So really everybody has a place in this conversation. It doesn't matter if you're somebody in the school, in the community, if you're a parent, if you're not a parent. It's just really important that we recognize that everybody has a place in school safety so we can begin to be really proactive about planning, implementing, and sustaining these efforts so we can really move upstream in a preventive way. And so that's what I like to think about when we say comprehensive school safety is everybody has a place in this conversation, regardless of where you are in your school community.
One little clarification that I think is important. Can you just explain, upstream might not be a term that everybody knows about or understands.
Yeah.
So if you can remember that you're talking to me.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. That was great. So I think a lot of times in schools right now, people are living in a really reactive space. What I mean by reactive is an event has occurred and they are responding to that particular event. So maybe a bullying event took place and a teacher or an administrator or a parent is sorting out a way to respond to that particular event after the event has occurred. And so when we think about an upstream solution, we're thinking about ways to prevent that bullying event from even occurring in the first place. So something like a social emotional learning curriculum, where we know that those can be an effective way to prevent bullying from occurring in the first place, because there are things like bystander intervention. They're really sort of creating ways that peers can interact more effectively with one another. So they don't even want to begin bullying in the first place. So we want to be beginning to move upstream so that if somebody feels like they want to engage in bullying, they can remember that they have these tools in their toolkit that, I don't really need to bully my peer, but instead I can pull from these toolkits, these resources that I've developed so that we can not have to live in this reactive space, but instead move in this proactive upstream kind of intervention space. So we're not being so reactive in our school safety strategy.
Before we get to the details of why we asked you to come on today, could you just tell us, where are you from? And you mentioned elementary school. Were you a teacher also? Can you just tell your background?
Sure. So I actually started in research, the world of research, and I started studying as a developmental psychologist, thinking about how children develop language and how they use that as a mechanism to move through the world. And I loved that. I thought it was really neat. I studied developmental psycholinguistics, which was so neat, and I absolutely loved it. But I always thought that there was one more sort of step beyond that I could use to understand what that means for the ways that children are learning. And so I did the next natural thing, which was become a teacher. And I went and got my master's in elementary education, K-8, and taught in some classrooms, kindergarten and fourth grade for a little bit, which I loved. And then I started noticing all of these safety kinds of questions that I had about the ways that students are moving through the world, how I can support their positive youth development, and even things like active shooter drills. Why are we doing these? Are they effective? How are students responding to these active shooter drills? As a teacher, is this making me feel safe? So I really started noticing all these different ways that I had questions about how to make sure that we're making schools as effective as possible. And from there, I went and I got my PhD at the University of Michigan in the combined program in education and psychology, really broadly focused around the issues that are on the precipice of education. So whether that was positive youth development or some of the things that were emerging as a consequence of COVID when schools were really kind of turned on their head. So really thinking about those, but then really at the core of the research that I did was school safety and positive youth development. So understanding how to equip teachers in schools the best way possible to make sure that they could support their students, especially students from diverse and historically marginalized backgrounds, because we know that not all students come to school with the same items in their sort of like figurative backpack. They're coming with different traumas or different kind of home experiences or different things that we really need to be able to bring them into the classroom and fully support them, regardless of who they are, and understand that school can be a really amazing place to support positive youth development and make sure that the focus is on learning and not just on staying safe. So I wanted to figure out a way to create a model around how to do that so that the overall outcome can be on developing into really positive, incredible humans and not just making sure that they're worried about if something's going to happen in the school. And likewise, how to make sure that teachers and administrators feel like they're well equipped with the strategies to enact those.
Did that lead you to this kind of idea of what is school safety? And is that kind of where you started from?
Yeah, so that's part of it. The other part is at the National Center for School Safety, we're really focused on improving comprehensive school safety through this violence prevention approach. And in doing that, we translate research into action and action into research through training and technical assistance and the lessons that we really learn from the field. And we support grantees all across the United States as they're enacting comprehensive school safety. And when this really was in its initial phase, like early in its iteration, we were sitting down thinking, we as in the team at the National Center for School Safety, we're talking about comprehensive school safety. Everybody's doing comprehensive school safety. And then we said, what is comprehensive school safety? There's not necessarily one unified definition. When we're telling people you have to add comprehensive in our comprehensive school safety, well, what does that mean? And we kind of had this aha moment as a team thinking, we're telling folks to do this thing, but we don't really have a definition of what this thing is. So we decided that it would be really helpful for us to create a model and a sort of a theoretical way for folks to be on the same page about what comprehensive school safety is and means when we're saying, go ahead and enact this. And this is what the thing is. Like, here's the model that we're talking about. And as we developed this model, we started with the overall outcome, which I've said a few times here, is what we conceptualize it as positive youth development. And when we say positive youth development, it's not just students doing really well in school and making good grades. It's students really gaining all the skills that they need to become productive and healthy and happy humans in order to move through the world in the most effective way possible so that they have the skills, the insight, the strategies, everything that they need to be the best types of people that they can be. And we argue that in order for that to be in place, there needs to be both physical safety and psychological safety, because it's more than just, a physical safety measure. Because a lot of schools, I think, and a lot of folks have this preconceived notion that when we talk about safety, it is what you see in a school. It's like a door being locked or a metal detector. But really, there's a lot more to that, particularly when we talk about the psychological safety. We're thinking about things like the social environment and the attentive environment and things that we can be putting in place to move upstream so that we're really, really supporting the whole child so that they feel safe in all the ways possible in schools. So that's where it started, with us talking about comprehensive school safety and not really having the right language or anchoring definition. And we really wanted to provide that for folks, that we were all kind of on the same page about how to move through keeping kids safe.
Hi, parents and gun safety advocates. At Stop the Killing, we believe that no parent should feel anxious about sending their children to school. That's why we've partnered with ROC. That's ROC, capital R, capital O, capital C. Their next generation platform, ROC Watch, takes advanced vision AI, originally developed for the U.S. military and law enforcement, and makes it available in our schools and learning institutions. ROC Watch adds an invisible smart security layer, screening visitors and detecting threats such as guns or, for example, wanted persons or registered sex offenders in real time. This frees school resources to focus on the important things, keeping our kids safe, happy, and learning. Learn more about the ROC mission, their ethical American-made technology, and what they're doing for local school districts across the country.
Learn more at roc.ai/Stop the Killing Podcast. That's roc.ai/Stop the Killing Podcast. It's time to mark your calendars for CrimeCon London 2025, happening on the 7th and 8th of June, partnered by True Crime. This is the ultimate true crime event, and Catherine from Stop the Killing and I will be there. And CrimeCon, if you've never been, is a unbelievably empowering place of advocacy where true crime fans, experts and survivors all come together to create something truly special. Last year, we heard from Anne Ming, who shared her truly inspirational journey of how the murder of her daughter Julie led her to change the double jeopardy laws in the UK. Her story had the entire room on their feet in a standing ovation. You cannot help but feel the advocacy and determination in every corner of that room. So join us and the true crime community at CrimeCon London, partnered by True Crime, the expert-led true crime channel available on all your platforms of choice. Head over to crimecon.co.uk and use my promo Ferris, as in my last name, F for frog, ERRIS for sugar, and you'll get 10% off at the checkout at crimecon.co.uk. We'd love to see you there.
24 hours ago, I found out the person that I'd been dating and seeing for the last 6 months is a con man.
That is my sister Emma. Andrew Tonks's lies had been so convincing, she'd invested $300,000 with him. However, the tables were about to turn on Andrew. What he didn't know was that Emma had discovered his real identity. But to get any chance of justice, Emma had to act like it was business as usual. Coming up in this series,
and that's when murder, all this stuff goes through my mind. I'm really, really scared.
I'm assuming Sarah has watched too much Netflix and figures I've been defrauding you. Couldn't be further from the truth.
That's what this was, a real-life story that seems so unbelievable, but it was actually true.
A true story that all starts with one simple swipe to the right. I'm Sarah Ferris.
And I'm Emma Ferris, and this is my story, Conning the Con.
I want to know more about what that looks like in practice. Like when you're talking about that model, are there checklists on each sort of side of the physical safety that you've got to have in place and the psychological safety?
Yeah, because I can hear parents listening to this or school officials listening to this right now thinking, okay, well, if we have these 17 things, then we have good school safety.
We're comprehensive.
Yes, that's great. Great question. So there's the psychological safety and the physical safety. And we really think about three main environments that the school safety strategies should influence: the physical environment, the social environment, and the attentive environment. And we argue that the school safety strategies really should influence all three of those environments in order to be considered comprehensive. That's part of the model. So the social environment is developing a positive culture that really promotes respect, inclusion, a sense of belonging within the school, and really a sense of responsibility to each other, and having an overall understanding that there are consequences if you break that code. So students and staff have access to social support systems like counseling, mentorship programs, and if they have those, they're more likely to feel supported and connected to one another within the school community, which in turn can really help reduce the risk of problem behavior. So school strategies within this sort of social environment bucket are things like social emotional learning curriculum, mentorship programs, restorative justice, and trauma-informed practices. So these are things that are sort of moving upstream, like we talked about earlier. And same for the attentive environment, which is an individual's focus and awareness on matters within the school. So things like who's listening if there's a concern in the school, how do those concerns get addressed, or do they have a trusted adult within the school that they can talk to, they as a student, if they see something who can they say something to? So how do they talk to an adult when they see that there's a concern? So things like an anonymous reporting system, mental health awareness programs, universal screening tools, and threat assessment programs. So that's the attentive environment, really just being aware and having somebody that they can talk to if there's something that they want to report before it escalates into a larger issue. And then the physical environment, school safety strategies within the physical school building, its access point, and the school grounds. And the design of the school environment can really help the community feel safe and prevent incidents from occurring. So surveillance cameras, door locks, fencing, and external lighting are some examples of physical. So again, we have the social environment, the attentive environment, and the physical environment. And we argue that school safety strategies should influence all three of those environments. But it's also really important for us to consider the contextual factors of where schools are situated, because we know that not all schools are situated in the same place, right? So there might be policies or directives or PTA requirements that really influence the way that those school safety strategies are implemented and sustained over time. So we really think about that in the model as well. We also think about the equitable implementation and equitable strategies in response for this, because again, this is a part of how no two schools are alike. So the equitable strategies in response really influences every aspect of this model. And we argue that schools should really adopt approaches that promote equity and need to ensure that all strategies are implemented equitably to avoid potential disproportionate effects across groups. And if these school safety strategies and their respective responses aren't implemented fairly, it can potentially undermine efforts to create a safe school, particularly for specific subgroups of students who might be affected by the selection of a strategy and the sustaining of that strategy or the implementation of it. So they really just have to be aware of how that strategy could potentially impact.
Can you give an example so our listeners better appreciate how a strategy that doesn't have equity, built into it could, in a disparate way, impact?
Yeah, sure.
Give some example.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's some research that indicates that implementing a metal detector can actually create greater feeling of feeling unsafe for Black and brown students. So understanding that having a metal detector actually can make students feel less safe if they belong to the particular subgroup. So understanding this is here, and we just want to have a conversation about why this is here and make sure that they're feeling like maybe there's a different way that they can enter through a particular door, or maybe a school decides to implement a threat assessment team as part of its school safety strategy. The school should pay particular attention and monitor the outcomes of that threat assessment to ensure that the decisions aren't affecting students based on membership or belonging to a certain group. So you can be doing things proactively, like knowing that a strategy could impact the student based on group membership, or you could do it after you are implementing a strategy and see if there are disproportionate effects for students.
When you have come up with this model and you're plugging in pieces into it, this bit fits into the social environment, whatever it is, was there anything that you added in that was new, that was something that you thought, well, this has been missing in all of the schools? Or how did you come up with what to plug in?
Yeah, great question. One of the ways that we thought about how the different school safety strategies fit in is we looked at the evidence of what we know about how school safety strategies work. But the equity piece is definitely a novel contribution, along with really thinking about how these three different environments work together. A lot of times when we talk about school safety, physical safety is the thing that immediately comes to mind for a lot of folks. And so by adding the social environment and the attentive environment, sometimes people have this aha moment of, well, I didn't really think about social emotional learning as part of school safety, or I didn't think about restorative justice as part of the conversation of school safety. And it really is. And it really ought to be like the forefront of conversation for us, where we're thinking more about sort of the proactive piece instead of being reactive of just managing things like school shootings, because that's only part of the conversation. If we're thinking about the iceberg of school safety, there's this sort of metaphor we use where the iceberg, the tip that is above the water is, the school shootings, which are horrible and devastating and awful. But below the surface are all the things that we can be preventing, which are bullying and all the other mental health awareness, everything else that we can be proactive about before the rest of the iceberg emerges. And I think that's what is also a novel contribution, is being proactive and moving upstream with these attentive and social environmental approaches to really think about how they interact together and move upstream in a more sort of preventive and comprehensive way.
I was working with a client this week, and maybe this example, maybe this is right on point with what you're saying. I was working with a client who has a student who made a threat to another student, and then that student was kicked out of school. And, now there's a young person who has to come back to school at some point. And they are looking for strategies on what to do. And I said, well, here's some ideas. And I'm thinking, not my skill sets, but I said, have you gone over, since you were the person who kicked him out of school, have you gone over to the student's house? Can you ask the parents whether you could speak with the child, with the counselor, to bring back some normalcy? And then can you think about an out of school event where you can maybe have the student who is threatened and the student who made the threat meet, so that, that they can repair that relationship and allow the student who made the threat to save face and be able to come back to school in that environment. Right. It's all very tricky. When she had said, I didn't think about what I could do afterwards. And that's really what we're struggling with, because we want the student to get back to school somewhere.
Right.
But we're still kind of worried, is the student mad at me and everybody else? And would the student reach out, And so, I think there's a lot of steps after the precipice of a threat or a bullying event. There's a whole downside coming back down the slope to help to get back to a normalcy and a comfort level where everybody can pass each other in the hallway.
Right, exactly. And I think being able to proactively address that and say, this happened, and here are some tools and strategies that we can enact to ensure that we are still a safe and supportive school community, and we're still addressing our school climate to make sure that everybody feels included, they feel seen, they feel understood. Here's a strategy that we can utilize instead of saying, that happened, let's just move on, because we can be proactive about it, but we can also sort out things after the fact to make sure we're working towards building safe and supportive school climates that attend to physical and that psychological safety as well.
You've come up with this theoretical model. If somebody's listening to this right now, what's stopping me putting this in my school?
I think the first barrier is just not knowing that the model is there. And so just sitting here and listening to the podcast is a great way for them to understand that it's there and it's available. And it's also just great to start recognize what is already being done in schools, because a lot of schools are already doing many of these strategies. So how can you leverage some of these things that you might already be enacting and kind of build upon those? Because there might be elements of social emotional learning curricula that schools might be implementing that can be further elevated to turn those into school safety strategies. So looking at what you're already doing and saying, oh, wait, we already are kind of moving in that direction. That's fabulous. Now, how can we build upon that to make sure that we're even further pushing the envelope to turn this into an intentional school safety strategy? So start by inventorying what you're doing, recognizing vulnerabilities. Maybe you don't have an anonymous reporting system. So how can you build that into your repertoire? Maybe you don't have a thing that attends to the attentive environment. Look at some of the school safety strategies that we recommend or that we know are evidence informed and build that on to adapting to more holistic and comprehensive plans. But really, a lot of schools are already doing some of these things, but might not recognize them as school safety strategies quite yet.
You know what I love about this? I hear people all the time say, we don't need this, we need that. I hear that all the time. We don't need bulletproof doors. We don't need metal detectors. We don't need cameras. We need more school resource officers at the door. Or we need more money for mental health. And as a school safety person, I think we need a little bit of everything. And I love that this says that. This tells us that we all know the earlier you can catch things, you don't need any of those other things. We wouldn't need any technical solutions or any protective solutions, any hardening of the target, if we were so good at these earlier things. But reality is we need all of them because that's part of school safety.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, physical safety is part of the conversation, but it certainly isn't the end all be all. It's one of the things that can be there to help move into this comprehensive direction, but it's not going to be the thing that really solves the entire conversation or the entire problem. It's necessary, but it's not a sufficient condition for psychological safety, which we argue have both to be there, right? And when we also look at the evidence-informed school safety strategies, the physical ones are the ones that don't necessarily have as robust of an evidence base as some of these other ones, like the social environmental strategies and the attentive environmental strategies. Those have a more strong evidence-informed base to demonstrate that they work and that they're effective in making schools safer as compared to the physical strategy. So we really want to make sure that we're using these all together to really move in a comprehensive direction and really sorting out how to keep schools comprehensively safe, because it can't just be one thing alone and then we're good. It's got to really be intertwined together. So definitely agree with what you're saying there.
Have you got test schools that you were studying or researching with your specific model in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that we would love to do and enact and really implement and see, what does this look like in practice? And so there's two things that we're working on doing. We're working on creating this really amazing tool where when schools or any really entity comes and says, we want to know exactly, here's what we're doing, and you can plug different strategies in and use this really neat tool, and it'll say, here's what you're doing, and here's some resources and strategies that we recommend, and link directly to examples of strategies and curricula and toolkits on our website. So that will be out relatively soon, and we're really excited to make that resource available for folks. But we collaborate with a variety of grantees across the United States. And if schools are interested in asking us questions about how to implement or would like to learn a little bit more about comprehensive school safety, that's always an opportunity for us too. So we'd love to learn a little bit more about, exactly in practice how this looks, but it's something that we're continuing to build our own evidence base on and would love to explore that further. But it's something that we're in early development on, but look forward to being able to report soon in the future.
I wanted to point out too that it always seems like everything is always, behind the magician's coat and you don't know what's going on. nc2s.org is a publicly accessible part of the, part of the effort on these organizations that are based at the University of Michigan, funded by public and private resources and doing incredible work, is their focus very much is we need to share as much as we can. Nothing's behind a paywall. Get a look at the research, get a look at our data. You want to talk about how we can apply the safety model. They'll put a panel of people together to say, here's how we're doing it. Here's how we're not. That's the kind of stuff that you can find. You don't need to be an academic to do that. You don't need to be a school principal. You don't need to be a company head or a teacher. Parent can do that. Anybody can look on NC2S, the number 2, and look up all this stuff, nc2s.org.
I just want to acknowledge that it can feel so overwhelming to know where to look for resources and how to begin this sort of journey into what school safety strategies are right for me. It can feel overwhelming. There's a lot out there, from vendors to emerging new resources, and it can feel confusing, and sometimes they're behind the paywall, and to know which ones are trusted resources. So I think we try and make that as straightforward as possible to help move upstream. So we try and make that freely available and also just as user-friendly as possible. It's all free. So I think that is a helpful place to start that journey, and just understanding that these are evidence-informed and they're trusted resources.
I always say to schools that I work with, clients that I work with, I say, add one more thing this year. Just add one thing this semester. If you can't do anything, let's find one that you can do that doesn't cost the district anything or doesn't ask the teacher to do one more thing. There's something out there we can do. I think this gives schools an opportunity to see that. That's nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you think there's any policies or recommendations that you'd like to see to move this to be something that is a recognized structure for schools?
I love that question. There's a lot of changes that I would like to see. The first is allocating more intentional funding towards school safety. And I think that also really creating more time for making this conversation more intentional, because I know schools are so inundated with so many things, and adding one more thing into the conversation can just feel like really, where do we even begin? So carving out time within professional development sessions or a school board committee meeting or sometime 5 minutes just to say, what are we doing for our comprehensive school safety planning? If that was a ubiquitous requirement for schools, maybe we could all begin to move together as a unified community towards keeping kids safe. But I think it's going to take a lot to accomplish that.
Is there gaps that you see in common? The most common things that people haven't plugged into their comprehensive safety scheme. And you're like, come on, people, that is not
did the model help you to realize, wow, this is always being left out of plans?
Yeah. What a fabulous question. So every time I present this model at a conference or at a school board or what have you, I present the model and it's a lot to digest. And I pause and I say, do you have questions or clarifications, or do you see anything that we left out of this model? And rarely do I get, oh, here's something that you left out. But very frequently, I get one of the two following. One, I had no idea social emotional learning could be considered part of school safety. It's this like light bulb moment that people think like, wow, we're doing this and it's school safety. And it's like, yes, it's amazing. You're already doing it. It is school safety. You're creating a positive school climate. You're making kids feel included. That's psychological safety. Like, yes, you're doing the thing. Acknowledge that. Like, now keep doing it. So that's one thing. And then the other part is the equity part. If I ask, what's a strategy that you're doing to promote equity and the equitable implementation and response of these strategies, it's often a bit of a head scratcher for folks. But sometimes it's just because they don't have the language or they don't know that they're doing those things. So it's really just kind of having to push their thinking a little bit and recognize that they are doing it, but they just might not be quite aware of it yet, or they haven't thought about it as intentionally as they can and should have been. So really, it's that social emotional learning is part of school safety and the whole social environment, in fact. And that's really new thinking for a lot of these folks. So really kind of promoting that and then that equity piece as well. So I think those are the two things that really stand out to me the most.
You're saying those are things that everybody can do. You know, nobody buys magnetometers, right? But teachers, parents, creating trusted adults, mentorships.
Right, exactly. And those can happen in the school building. Those can happen at home. Those can happen on the school bus. That can happen as part of this entire comprehensive way that we're thinking about school safety. So, yeah.
This is absolutely fascinating. I'm a parent and I'm sitting here thinking, I want to know how many of these pieces of the puzzle my own children's school have in their system already. What can I do to ask the school in a way that's going to be like not overwhelming, as you say, to them, to be like, oh my God, they've just bottled every single.
Yeah, you don't want to take this list. Why don't you do all these things? That's not helpful either.
Not
to
at
a school.
all.
So a first step could just be asking the school what their comprehensive school safety plan looks like, or their school safety plan in general. That could be either by attending a school board meeting or becoming part of the PTA. You could also, if you feel like you are a trusted messenger for your student or your child, asking them if they're aware of their school safety strategies and plans and beginning the conversation and really just engaging there and becoming a proactive member of the community. You could also show up with the model and say, hey, I learned about this really great way of thinking about comprehensive school safety. Do you know if we're doing anything that really kind of looks at the social environment, if there are any strategies or any kinds of things about the attentive environment? Do we have an anonymous reporting system? And if not, make recommendations for how and why there should be strategies that influence the attentive environment, the social environment, and the physical environment. But it just starts with beginning the conversation and that transparency from both yourself and the school. And again, everybody has a place in the school safety conversation. And so starting that conversation is a great place to start.
Brilliant. Taking that to the school. I was
Love
thinking
that.
I might get a T-shirt made with the model printed on it and just walk in with it.
Love it.
Get your
Please
merch
do.
now.
One of the really beautiful things about this job is that I feel in such a position of privilege to be able to study this. And I love it so much. And I hope that I do my job so well that someday it ceases to exist. But I'm eager to begin collaborations with schools and move into exactly what we were talking about earlier, looking at the implementation of the model in partnerships with schools in a lot of different contexts to see, does this in practice, does this look exactly how we anticipate? Do we need to make different iterations or adaptations to the model based on how students are perceiving it? Because I think, everyone has a role in school safety, but this also includes making space for youth to understand how school safety is discussed, because in many ways, they're really the experts about what school safety means. So it's really critical that we acknowledge and honor their voice and their perspectives and empower kids in a way that can help lead to positive youth development through these efforts. So I'm looking forward to really engaging in collaborations with schools, because ultimately school safety is a really quickly evolving topic. Are there also things that I can be doing to make sure schools have this as a tangible resource to enact and keep everybody in the school community as safe as possible?
Amazing. Well, Dr. Sarah Stilwell, what an absolute pleasure to meet another fabulous Sarah. No, joking, to meet you today. It's been really insightful. So thank you so much for your time.
We'll certainly put things in our show notes, but tell them where they can go to look themselves.
The model is available on our website, nc2s.org, and under our resource page. And it is called A Positive Youth Development Approach to Comprehensive School Safety.
And if you are listening, make sure you go and click on the show notes, because there will be loads of information in there for you. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Stop the Killing. Remember, these conversations aren't just important, they're necessary. If you're ready to dive deeper into the issues we cover, Catherine's book, Stop the Killing, and also How to Talk About Guns with Anyone are available now at catherineschweit.com. Stop the Killing is proudly produced by Sarah Ferris Media. For more award-winning podcasts like Conning the Con and Watching Two Detectives, visit sarahferrismedia.com. As an independent podcast, we rely on your support to keep these critical discussions alive. If you value our work, please consider supporting us on patreon.com/stopthekilling or by simply subscribing on Apple Podcasts now. Not only will you help us to continue this mission, but you'll also get early access to ad-free episodes and exclusive content that takes a deeper look into unfolding incidents. And don't forget, Stop the Killing is a team effort. You can make a difference by leaving a review on Apple and sharing this podcast with others. Together, we can keep pushing these conversations forward. Thank you for being part of this journey. Stay safe, stay informed, and let's continue to stop the killing.
So when the scammer uses the hypnotic method of building rapport, then they create dysfunctional, delusional reality.
That's how a scam begins, convincing the mark that it makes perfect sense to hand over their money to a con artist. The Scams and Cons podcast tells you how scams are run. You'll hear how people are convinced to buy fake art, buy machines that print money, or steal your house.
I get a phone call from my wife, and she let me know that they had decided to move all our stuff out. I could no longer do anything about it except go through an eviction.
And you'll hear it from the experts, people who run the cons.
So we go to your bank, you go in and get $6,000 cash, give us each $3,000, we give you this. You go home, and what you find out is cut up newspaper.
It's fun to know how the trick is done, and that's what Scams and Cons is all about. Listen at scamsandcons.com or wherever fine podcasts are found.
How far would you go in your pursuit of the American dream? Would you put in the work?
911, what's your emergency?
Would you take a big risk?
What's the problem? What's the problem?
Would you cheat? Would you lie?
Were they shot? Were they shot?
Would you kill?
My mom is dead. My mom is right there.
I'm Jeremy Schwartz, and I'll be taking you inside the minds of some of our most notorious felons and outlaws, exploring the dark side to the American dream. You'll meet the picture-perfect brothers who teamed up to kill their parents, the thief who stole babies and ruined countless lives, the crypto king who siphoned off billions in the name of saving the world, and plenty more. From assassins to gangsters to killers and con artists. Whatever the case, whoever the criminal, you don't know the full story until now. Go to AmericanCriminal.com or search for and follow American Criminal wherever you get your podcasts.
Something is creeping in, don't follow it down.
Let me introduce you to Barry Clue, an authorised financial advisor from New Zealand and a very special kind of stain on humanity.
He was a very knowledgeable young guy.
He was a registered financial advisor.
Type of guy that was bending over backwards to help you.
Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that Barry sounds like a great guy, and you'd be right. Well, right up until the point when you're wrong.
It was all fictitious.
She stole from my son who has a disability.
Chris never knew. He died believing that we're all taken care of.
A psychopath is somebody who lacks empathy, acts impulsively. I think there's a strong case that Barry might be all of those things, actually.
To find out how Barry Clue stole over $15 million from 81 victims, subscribe to Clueless, the long con. That's Clueless, spelt Klooghless.